Good evening and welcome to the Town of Rockland Board of Selectmen meeting from Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. Please turn your attention to Vice Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Larry Ryan, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Larry?
Ladies and gentlemen, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Larry. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded by WRPS for playback on Comcast Channel 14 and Verizon Channel 31. It will also be available for online video on-demand viewing at WRPSRockland.com within 24 hours of its conclusion, as are other recently recorded meeting and community events. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. Thank you. First on the agenda tonight, community announcements. Doug? Healthcare Worker of the Week.
Sure, thank you, Mike. And before I go into reading who the Healthcare Worker of the Week is, I didn't know if you wanted to give a little bit of background, since that was sort of your idea with others, before I got right into it.
Yeah, so I was talking to a couple of the local businessmen in town, and we were trying to think of an idea to honor some people, and one of them suggested that we try to honor the healthcare workers. We do a lot of great things in town, honoring our first responders and our teachers, and honoring some of our students. But that's a group I think that sometimes gets overlooked is our healthcare professionals, and we have a lot of them, whether it be a doctor, nurse, home healthcare aides. So, I talked to a couple of businesses, McCoon Biggins and Rockland Athletics, and they were all both willing to sponsor the event along with the town of Rockland. They put together, Rockland Athletics put together a great design for Rockland Strong that was specific to, our healthcare professionals. And, we started off the competition, and we have a winner officially as of today. And Doug, I'll let you take it from there.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'm going to try to share my screen with the information. Can you all see that? Yes?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I thought I'd read it. This is our first winner, and it's Kari Ciano. She's a registered nurse with a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and I thought I'd read the profile that she submitted to us after she was informed that she was the winner. So she wrote, "Thank you, Rockland community. I am humbled, blessed, and honored to have been nominated and selected as Rockland's Healthcare Worker of the Week. As a lifelong Rockland resident, I attended Holy Family School and Rockland High School. I'm a true bulldog. I pursued my registered nursing career at Brockton Hospital School of Nursing and went on to further my nursing education at Curry College. Later into my career, I self-studied and became a certified rehabilitation registered nursing, obtaining my CRRN. I've been a registered nurse for 20 years, and quite honestly, I can say it was the best decision I've ever made. I started my career as a registered nurse employed at Braintree Rehabilitation Hospital, where I worked for 16 years. Then I pursued a change in my career, reaching for a goal I had as a small child of becoming a community health nurse, visiting nurse. I'm currently employed with the South Shore Visiting Nurses Association. Being a registered nurse in the community, I'm truly blessed to care for patients in their own homes and help assist them restore their health and return to a state of wellness. I'm married to Michael Ciano, who is also a lifelong Rockland resident, and I have two children, Maria, age 17, a senior at Rockland High School, and Anthony, age 14, an 8th grader at Rogers Middle School. I can't tell you all how much this recognition means to me. I am beyond thankful and grateful, but further than that, I'm blessed with being a registered nurse and being provided the opportunity to help others. So I thought, what a wonderful way to start that competition. So congratulations to Kari. And we'll keep doing this every week. So I encourage residents, we posted it on our town's Facebook page, and it's also on the town's website. You email the Board of Selectmen's executive assistant with your nominations, and whoever gets the most votes for a qualified person will be selected. We'll be doing this again next week. Two more things, Mike, I thought I'd mention quickly. One is that it's Mental Health Awareness Week, as the board remembers when Jean Blaney from the Youth Commission came in recently. So I just wanted to remind folks that this week is the Mental Health Awareness Week. There's a number of links on the Youth Commission's website, and especially their Facebook page, with crafts and yoga, all different kinds of events. We're lighting the sign outside of Town Hall as well as the building itself green. Rocks are being painted green all around town. But I would just encourage folks to take a look at the Rockland Youth Commission Facebook page. There's links to the Mental Health Awareness Week activities. It's certainly very important, and now more than ever, given the pandemic that we're in the middle of. And lastly, related to the pandemic, more unfortunate news, Rockland Day is officially going to be canceled this year. There's just no way that could be done next month. So it's going to be canceled, or call it postponed, until June 19th of 2021. So I wanted to let folks know about that. And that's all I had for community announcements.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, open session minutes of April 21st, 2020. I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
And Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Okay, and myself, that's unanimous. Okay, next on the agenda, new business. Vote to deficit spend COVID-19 related expenditures per Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31, and authorized related correspondence to the Department of Revenue. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. So as the board knows, generally towns are not allowed to deficit spend. One of the big things we are allowed to do, which you're all aware of, is snow and ice. But given the situation we're in now, we are going to be putting in for some significant reimbursement for various COVID-related expenses. So the state, through the Department of Revenue, has a procedure where if the board votes to deficit spend this specific category and sends in documentation to the Department of Revenue, we'll be allowed to do that. And we do anticipate covering all our costs through federal reimbursement. And there's a number of staff on this meeting tonight: Biz, Jen, Vinny, and Stacy. So obviously, with this or anything else, if you guys have anything to add, please jump in and correct me or help me out. But that's the crux of it. The draft of the letter's in there. So I think if you just vote to deficit spend as noted in the letter and authorize Mike to send it in, we'll be good to go.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And myself. Okay. It's approved. Next on the agenda, 2020 Memorial Day Parade update. Veterans Agent Vinny Fontaine. Vinny, you with us?
I am.
Welcome, Vinny.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. Unfortunately, there's not going to be a parade this year. And flagging of the graves will be done by my office. Unfortunately, I just can't have everybody coming out that we usually have. It's just be too many people. Also, we will be having a ceremony. It will be taped, and it will be broadcast on Memorial Day.
We're broadcast on WRPS, Vinny?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And you said that there won't be any flagging of the graves?
No, well, the law, actually, I have to flag the graves on Memorial Day, but I will be doing it myself.
Vinny, I'll get nothing to do during the day, and I'm sure that we can socially distance ourselves in the graveyard. And I'll be glad to help you out.
I'll reach out to you.
Very good.
And I just want to mention that we have lost 8 veterans to the virus so far. It's very sad, and it's a lot to take in. And knowing most of them, it's actually it's very difficult.
Like, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, while we, I guess, have this opportunity with Vinny here, I just want to express, and I think all of us, really agree, Vinny, we just want to thank you. And I want to thank you from the bottom of our heart, and from my heart, for everything you're doing. Whether it's food and meals for veterans, whatever you're doing, you have just really, and really are continuing to go above and beyond. And you have a whole community who has realized it, and I can truly, deeply appreciate everything you do, Vinny. So thank you.
Doug, should I mention the food on Friday? So I'm working with Weymouth and Abington. I was able to secure 100 cases of food for veterans, and I'm going to have it's enough food for 2 weeks for 2 people, and we're going to have that delivered to the VFW in Whitman because they just had a bigger parking lot to work out of.
Mhm.
And so I'm asking any veteran in town if they would like a box of food to please go on the town webpage. There's a link, follow the link and sign up so you can secure a box of food.
Rich, any comments for Vinny, Rich?
No, not at this time, no.
Sarah?
No, thank you for everything you're doing, Vinny.
Oh, thank you.
And Larry?
You're a great American, Vinny.
I try.
So just to echo the rest of the board, Vinny, you know, it's obviously it's been very, very trying times, and none more so in the part of the community that you deal with specifically the most. I know that these people weren't just clients of yours, but they're also your friends, and for that, you know, I offer our heartfelt condolences to you and the veterans community in Rockland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate your hard work.
I love
Okay.
my job.
It shows.
Oh.
All right, moving on. Appointment for Zoning Board of Appeals. First, this comes up because we recently received word from Stanley Cleaves that he will not be seeking another term on the Zoning Board of Appeals. He sent a quick letter just saying, I, Stanley Cleaves, will not be seeking another term on the Zoning Board of Appeals. After being on the board for 38 years and turning 84 years old, I think it's time for me to step down and let another volunteer move up. It's been a great experience and an honor to have served and to watch Rockland grow. Again, I thank you. I have already talked to Rob Rosa, the chairman of the ZBA. Sincerely, thank you, Stanley Cleaves. 38 years on the board, that is older than 2 of our members and just a couple years younger than me. That's pretty impressive. 38 years of public service to a specific board. Just want to offer Stanley Cleaves our thanks, our heartfelt thanks for 38 years of dedication. Any other members have any comments?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you very much. I know he's been very, very involved in town, as his other members of his family. They've been here for a long, long time in this community. So I just want to say thank you very much for everything he's done.
Kara?
Thank you for your service, Stanley.
Larry?
A lot of years to serve the town. I thank him for it. All those, it's a long time. That's all I can say. Thank you, Stan.
Mr. Mullen?
I just really want to echo those, thanks and appreciation. Especially, I mean, the zoning board, like as we all know, is a very intense group and board. They probably have, some of the longest meetings, like of all our town boards and committees. And I just want to thank him for, what he's done, but also really to help shape the fabric of Rockland as we know it over those years as well. Thank you.
So with that, we do have an application of one of the current members that would like to take the position of permanent member, a voting member of the zoning board, and that is Charles Hessian of 101 Huggins Road. Chuck, as most of you guys know, he's on the sewer committee. He's an alternate already on the zoning board. He's on the charter review, and he worked with Rockland baseball for over 12 years. So he's somebody that's been involved in quite a lot of things. I'm open to, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Chuck Hessian as a permanent member of the zoning board.
Second.
that.
I have a motion in 2 seconds. Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Penny,
Yes.
and Miss Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. That's unanimous. Welcome aboard, Chuck. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, next on the agenda is our Town of Rockland annual appointments. For this, I figured we would go to, Kara was good enough to volunteer to do this for us, so she'll just read them one by one, and then at the end, we'll just vote it as a group. If at any point any of the other members have a question or concern about an appointment, just feel free to interrupt Kara, and we can discuss it from there and pick up where she left off. All right, Kara, you're up.
American with Disabilities Act Committee, John Melvin, 21 Bradford Street. Charter Maintenance Committee, 7-year term, Jared Valenzola, 1112 Webster Street. Charter Maintenance Committee Ad Hoc, 1-year term, Chuck Hession, 110 Huggins Road.
Now, is Chuck allowed to be appointed to 2 committees?
Yeah.
But it can be 1 elected and 1 appointed board, I believe. So now he's be on 2 appointed committees.
Why don't you pause on that one then, and we'll have to do a little more digging on it. Sorry about that.
I mean, I don't care if it's legal.
Mhm.
Okay, so in Chuck. So we'll just hold off on that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's fine.
Well, I think you have something like the charter maintenance where it's not a permanent.
It's an ad hoc.
Yeah.
Appoint him, and then if he can't be appointed, that's
Okay.
easy.
That makes sense.
So we go on.
Go, Kara.
Community Center Buildings Supervisory, 3-year term, Jean Blaney, 118 Turner Road. Rich Furlong, 677 Union Street. Community Preservation Committee, 3-year term, Derek Yule, 649 Liberty Street. Constable, 3-year term, Adam Loomis, 630 Broad Street, Bridgewater. John Torchio, 15 Homestead Street, Brockton. Council on Aging for a 3-year term, John Conway, 76 Damon Road. Edward Malone, 701 Brookline Way. Land Use Council, this is an annual appointment, Galvin and Galvin, 10 Enterprise Street, Suite 3, Duxbury. Tax Title Council, annual appointment, Attorney Laura Brown, 800 Hingham Street. Town and Labor Council, annual appointment, Clifford and Kenny, LLP, 31 Scoosett Street, Unit 405, Pembroke. Director of Emergency Management, annual appointment, Scott Duffy, 86 Stanton Street. Fire Station Building Committee, annual appointment, Scott Duffy, 86 Stanton Street. Jim Killinger, 44 Robin Lane. Jean Blaney, 118 Turner Road. Susan Egan Tasker, 59 Norman Street. Forest Fire Warden, this is an annual appointment, Scott Duffy, 86 Stanton Street. Fence Viewer, alternate, annual appointment, Vinnie Fontaine, 317 Plain Street. Historical Commission, 3-year term, Peter Dow, 31 Union Street. Memorial Committee, annual appointment, Richard Laria, 1 Leah Drive. Anton Materna, 416 Market Street. John Melvin, 21 Bradford Street. Jeffrey Nigerian, 22 Bradford Street. Open Space Committee, 3-year term, Kathy Kirby, 162 Liberty Street. Open Space and Recreation Committee, 3-year term, Donald Kahn, 64 Union Street. Rich Furlong, 677 Union Street. Jean Blaney, 118 Turner Road. Registrar of Voters, 3-year term, Gerard Callahan, 84th South Douglas Street. Southfield Redevelopment Authority Advisory Board, Union Point, 3-year term, Kelly O'Brien McKinnon, 42 Plain Street. And the Tree Warden, this is an annual appointment, Dave Taylor, 329 Summer Street.
Entertain a motion to approve all appointments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Kara Nyman,
Aye, yes.
Larry Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes, sirree.
and Mr. Penny,
Yes.
and myself. That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, moving on. Other new business not reasonably anticipated. Anything under that?
I do not.
Okay. Rockland Town Clerk. Is that up next? Nope. Okay, we're gonna go to COVID under old business, COVID-19 update. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. And Donna, I just labeled that phone number as yours. I think you also called in on a phone. Is that right? No? I looked at the number, so. Hang on, I got you muted. Hold on. Is that you, Donna?
Yes.
Okay, fine. I labeled it that way so your number wasn't out there. All right, give me 1 second here. All right, thank you, Mike. Yeah, so for the COVID update, I do want to share my screen one more time. That is okay. And I'll do that right now. So this is the most recent information from the state, the Department of Public Health, and it just shows as of today, 1,184 cases reported today, over 70,000 in total, 122 new deaths, 5%. I mean, I won't read through the whole thing. You can see it yourself. 9,000 new tests and 333,000 total tests. So I thought that information was interesting, and this isn't anything that's proprietary to us in Town Hall. Anybody can get this off the mass.gov website. A couple of the other things I thought that I would mention are, that since we last met, and I'm just going to mute one or two of you because I'm getting feedback on my end, and I don't know if that's that might help. So since our last meeting, the town issued through the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen's office a face covering requirement for the town. One interesting thing related to that, I'm going to screen share a bunch today if you don't mind. And I thought this was sort of interesting because it kind of shows what we deal with here in working in town government. So I'm going to share 2 emails that we received at Town Hall related to the town's face covering order. The first one, it's this part at the bottom, and I redacted it. The message was, your town has stopped me from doing my business to purchasing product from a business in your town because I need a mask to enter. My right to not wear one is being infringed upon. I am placing you on legal notice of legal action. My rights do not come from a town or state government. So that was interesting. Okay. And then not long after that, I got another unsolicited email from a person, and she wrote, Dear Mr. Lapp, please extend my gratitude to each member of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health for keeping our town safe during this difficult time. The mask mandate for workers and customers of essential businesses is deeply appreciated. It is of great comfort knowing the leaders of our town are looking out for us. Best regards. So I just thought it was kind of funny, but just very telling, because that's a lot of what we do. Many times what we do, some people love it and some people hate it. But since the town came out with our order, the governor has since come out with his statewide face covering order, which I'm sure the public has already heard about. It's taking effect. And all that information is available on the town website, in addition from mass.gov. The governor also at his last press conference extended the stay-at-home advisory until May 18th. So similarly, all our town buildings are closed until at least May 18th. And a number of us were on a call earlier today with the lieutenant governor, and she explained that they've formed this reopening advisory board, but nobody should be under the conception that on May 18th and 19th, everything is going to be opened immediately. What it was announced, what the plan is and what the criteria and the metrics are on the 18th or the 19th, and that it will be thoughtful and phased in. So it's not as though the 18th or the 19th we'll all be back in our buildings. Yeah, Mike.
Sorry, Doug. You were breaking up there a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if anybody else caught that. There was some weird feedback.
Can you hear me okay now? Sorry about that. So it's just describing that on the 18th, when the stay-at-home advisory is over, it won't be an immediate reopening. The reopening advisory board will have a plan that they'll be releasing that'll have the metrics, things like 2 weeks of declining cases, all those sorts of things. One thing we are looking at during this time is that we're going to have, while we're in this situation where we're in this shutdown, lockdown, we are looking to permit town employees to carry over unused vacation time into the next fiscal year more than they normally wouldn't under these circumstances. So that's if anybody has any questions or different thoughts on that. But given the situation that we're in, I think it makes sense. We're obviously not going to do that in a situation where it would cost us any money. On the contrary, we're actually looking at buying out some unused vacation time in the fire department at straight time rather than the overtime it would normally use to fill those shifts. But for regular office employees, we're going to allow them to carry it over because we think that makes sense. I should have gone over the town numbers earlier when I was showing the state website. Currently in town, we have 181 total cases, and that's split roughly 50-50 between the nursing homes and in the community. So it's around 91 in the nursing homes and 90 in the community currently. Talking with the police department, they indicated generally arrests are now trending back up again. More domestics, people have been getting restless, and I don't mean to minimize a domestic incident like that, but just I think with people being stuck in their homes for so long and the weather warming up, there's tending to be more activity that the police are involved in. As far as health goes, police staff are all healthy. There's no cases. On the fire department side, they're obviously very busy. They were responding to a fire today, as some of the board members noted before we started. And health-wise, there are 3 firefighters that are currently positive, but they're all feeling okay. They seem to be doing just fine. There was one issue related to COVID, related to the federal funding that's being made available, that's going to all the different states throughout the country. And that involves the $90 million that you may have heard about that Plymouth County is going to administer on their own rather than turning that over to the state. If you'd like to talk more about that, I know Mike Mullen is actually on the advisory board, so he probably has even more information. I can just say generally that, virtually all the towns were really urging the county to turn it over to the state to let them administer it, because we all felt that the state has more experience and resources and manpower to be able to properly administer something as critical as this. The state even said they would indemnify the county if the state were to take it over, because if there's any mistakes or inappropriate use of funds, there's a lot of liability there. But my understanding is that Plymouth County commissioners were very adamant that they felt they could do a better job and return more of that money to the county than the state may have done. So that's how that decision went down. So I have one more COVID update, and then if you want to have Mike add more, he might want to do that. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, related to COVID and federal funding, it looks like there's going to be some additional CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant funds, available throughout the country for eligible communities. And Rockland is obviously one of those. So Jen has been working with Wayne Dara and COG for a potential, and I stress the word potential because it may not make sense to do this, but a possible regional application where we would look at 3 different things: a program to provide rental and mortgage assistance to low and moderate income families, a program to provide financial assistance to micro enterprises. Those are businesses with 5 or fewer employees that have been impacted by the pandemic, and public social service funding to support nonprofit service providers that have seen an increase in demand due to the pandemic. So those, I believe, let me just take a look. Yeah, those are basically what's been happening. I think the last couple days, we haven't seen our numbers change too much, so that's sort of good news as far as cases. But unless Mike wants to add more on the Plymouth County administration of the 90 million, that was all I had for now.
Yeah, we can go to Mike. Mike, I know you had mentioned to me earlier that you wanted to speak briefly on this topic, so by all means.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an issue, as many of us have either heard about or read about in the paper or just heard about, locally. About 2.5 weeks ago now, the coronavirus relief fund at the federal level, a guidance was put out, to state and local and to county governments, like and within the period of like a 4-day window, everyone had to apply. County governments ended up applying because they were eligible, and then quickly thereafter heard from the Commonwealth that that funding was funding that the Commonwealth had been anticipating, like, and planning on using in their response effort, whether it be like for unemployment, for testing, for nursing home response, and the like. And, and they're trying to leverage and balance, their entire, revenue situation and expenditure situation as well. So, the counties that did apply, and with the exception of Plymouth, in very short order, they withdrew and they turned the money back, rightfully to the Commonwealth. Like our colleagues in the Plymouth county government, they decided to go another track, and it's extremely difficult, like in my opinion, to really try to understand, the decision of the county commissioners. Frankly, as we all know, the state, the governor, is doing incredible work to, really make sure the state, in our cities and towns, and everyone has all the resources and all the, and all the capacity that we need to like respond to this thing. And in my view, Plymouth County just really made that, really 90 million times harder than it, should be, for the Commonwealth and all of our cities and towns. Later in the meeting, we're going to be talking about our local aid numbers. We're going to talk and, be talking about the state funding that we need to close out FY20 and go into FY21 and in a halfway decent position. And in my view, the decision, by the Plymouth County Commissioners really undermines all of that. And, I think Rockland, over the past few years, we rebuilt, our relationship with the county. And, something like this, especially when they were hearing from the governor, the inspector general, all the cities and towns are asking and requesting that they do the right thing and turn the money back. The fact that they went at it alone and they're going this way, frankly, doesn't give me a whole, a lot of confidence. There's a lot of things about, county government that does, but this decision is really not one of them. And I really just wanted to, share my thoughts, share my opinion. Also my opinion, the way, last week's, county commissioners meeting was really designed. It wasn't really truly designed to hear from advisory boards, the advisory board members about what, their communities, thoughts and perspective on their decision was. It wasn't about that at all. They just really, they went right over it and told us about the process that they envisioned, to get out, to the local communities, to be able to make the funding available, that they have no idea, what it's really for, what it's really going to be there to help with, other than it's there. And, I did express my concern, about the decision, especially as it relates, to the revenues that the state is going to need, to make payments on local aid in Chapter 70. I also said that the people they should really be talking about, in terms of how they're going to make the funding available based on the decision, really isn't the advisory board. It's our local, town administrators and managers and accountants. They're the ones, and Doug and Biz and Jen and everyone, they're the ones who are going to try, and already like compiling receipts, like information about expenditures, to be able to use the, really secretly. So it's it's extremely disappointing, but I just really wanted to give everyone an update about where that issue was, what happened last Thursday night, and 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 hopefully, things with this really turn out better than a lot of folks are actually anticipating. So,
Thank you, Mike. Anybody on the board with questions for Doug about the COVID-19 update, or for Mike about the Plymouth County Commissioner's decision?
Actually, Mike, can I add one more thing?
Go ahead, Doug.
Can you hear me okay now? I got a different mic in case that
Yep.
helps. Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you, Mike Mullen, for that more detailed explanation of what I mentioned. One thing I forgot to say regarding the governor's most recent order for face coverings, just so the general public understands. Basically, unless you're guaranteed to be more than 6 feet away from somebody, when you go out, you have to have a face covering. And one thing they made clear on a call with DPH today is that if you just take your shirt and pull it up over your mouth, that's not good enough, because your shirt can just fall back down. It doesn't have to be a surgical mask or any kind of formal mask. It can be a more homemade mask, or the kind of scarves and other types of things you can wrap around. But if you go to a business and you don't have it, under the governor's executive order, the business may decline you entry into their business if you don't wear a mask. We're not looking to have our police department involved in this. We're not looking to arrest people or collect fines. We're looking for compliance. We just want people to be safe. And so the Board of Health agent in town, like everywhere else, will be enforcing this. And what she's going to be trying to do is get compliance. And so I just want to make sure everybody understands, when you're walking down the street, if you're going to a store, whatever you're doing, unless 100% of the time you're guaranteed to be more than 6 feet away, you have to have a proper face covering. And there's a lot of info on our website and on mass.gov that gives a lot more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Larry, any questions? Larry?
I might be muted.
You're good now. Any questions, Larry?
Nope.
Mike?
no, I don't have any. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Rich?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Kara?
No, thank you.
Okay. And myself either. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda, town election and annual town meeting update. Town clerk Donna Shortall. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. Okay, I'm asking you tonight if you will take a vote to set the date for the town election. As you know, the state signed the Chapter 45 of the Act of 2020, which allowed the postponement of the election. It does, however, have to be held by June 30th. So I'm asking that you consider setting it to the date of June 20th.
Donna, can I stop you for a second? You're breaking up quite a bit.
Okay.
Okay,
Is
that's
that
better.
any better?
That is better.
Okay. I'm asking that you set a date for June 20th. We have to have the election, according to the state, we have to hold the election by June 30th. So by holding it on June 20th, it would still be on a Saturday, and it would give us time to do all the legal paperwork that we have to do beforehand to set the new date. We would have to have the last day to register to vote would be 10 days before the actual election date. So by holding it on June 20th, we can comply with all of that. I did take from other towns a contingency plan, which would allow us to provide all the safety measures that should be in place, because we will still have to have polling hours at polling places. It's written into the Mass Constitution. We can't get by that, so we have to allow for in-person voting. I would ask that you consider cutting the hours. It was allowed in the acts that they came up with. We can actually cut back the physical hours to 4 hours. They have to start at 12 noon. So I would ask that I would ideally like to see it cut back to 4 hours. I know in speaking with a couple of people that you feel that that's too short. But if we really push the fact that people can vote by mail in, then hopefully a lot of people won't want to show up. I don't know what kind of questions you have.
Rich, any questions?
So I do have one. Donna, would this allow early voting? And if so, where would that take place?
It's not physical early voting. The state made sure that when they allowed for early voting for this town election, there's no physical early voting. They can do it by mail-in. They have to write an application, or they have to write a request. It doesn't have to be an application. They can write it on a napkin. All it has to say is, I want a ballot mailed to me at, and they have to sign it because I have to have a signature. Because if there's any question about somebody getting a ballot for someone else, I have a whole file cabinet. When you register to vote, I am required to hold on to your registration card. So if there's a question, I can check the signatures. So anytime you ask for a ballot to be mailed, you have to do it with the signature. You can't even send an email unless you can sign it and scan it, and then you can send it that way.
Okay, all right.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. So even on absentee, it's all going to be by mail, requesting the ballot and sending that in. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kara?
Donna, so say we set a date for June 20th as an election date right now. When is the earliest that the mail-in voting process can start?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
If you set it today, if you vote to set the date tonight, I already have absentee ballots because there are people who apply for absentee ballots for every election for the whole year because they have doctor's notes, they have reasons why they can't go to the polls. Those absentee ballots will go out tomorrow. Anyone who chooses to request a mail vote will go out the day that we get the request. And they can only vote. Well, they can only do it once. So.
And will you need the regular amount of staff you usually do for an election, or would you cut down on the staff needed as well?
I'll cut down on the staff.
Okay.
I can what the state voted allows me to cut back on the number of staffing, so I'd only have one person check in, one person check out. I am planning to have the other two, the clerk and the warden, because I feel that people are going to have to be able to keep an eye on the voters to make sure that they're keeping a distance when they're trying to get to a voting booth or when they're trying to leave, and to take care of any questions that you still have people that show up that are inactive voters or they're not registered to vote. So in order to take care of the regular problems, and then in anticipation of any other kind of problems, the person who shows up without a mask. We will have some at the door, but some people will, people, some people will show up and say, I'm not going to wear it. The contingency plan that I sent to you, that I am asking you to look at, allows for the fact that, no, we won't turn that person away totally, but they will be asked to wait until the end when everyone else has voted. Then they can go in and vote if they're not going to wear a mask, because then we can close the polls after they finish.
Great, thank you.
Larry, any questions?
Nope, doing a great job, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike?
I mean, I go back and forth on the 4 hours. I mean, I can absolutely understand why, why you're recommending it, Donna. And but then I think, okay, if this was an election that, we actually had a contested election, and there were, I mean, I believe all the races on the ballot are uncontested at this point, right, Donna?
No, there's one.
Board of Health.
What the
Board
hell?
of Health.
The Board of Health has a contested seat.
Okay. Sorry, I stand corrected then. I apologize. But, I just, trying to, especially now that I just learned that we do have a contested race, trying to cram the voter turnout, that whatever it is whatever it's going to be, or whatever we're going to have into 4 hours, just always squeezing people into that time frame. Rather if we had it a longer time period, it would just arguably spread out, even more so the the volume of people in the building at once. But I mean, I can understand why you would recommend it, but I mean, on the flip side, I could also see having a longer window would spread out the volume in the buildings, and could achieve maybe the same goal in a better way. I don't know. I'm just really thinking out loud and throwing that out there.
No, I understand. My concern is that, or the way I'm thinking about it is that if we push it hard enough that you can vote from the safety of your home, hopefully we're going to get the majority of the people who vote continuously who are going to want to vote from the safety of their home. They're not going to want to take the chance. And if we make people aware that if you have to come and vote, there's only going to be set number of hours, because now you're asking people to come and face an unknown, and I'm talking the workers, come and face an unknown, and if you can keep it down to a reasonable amount of hours, you don't have to involve a lunch break, you don't have to involve a supper break, because to ask them to sit there for 4 hours is one thing. To ask them to sit there for 6 hours, that's a lot. And to try to say, well, we could do it in shifts. Now you're talking twice the amount of safety equipment, and you're going to have to make sure that you thoroughly clean even their station when they leave so that the next staff can come in. So I honestly believe that the best way for all safety precautions would be to cut it down to what the state has considered reasonable, and cut it down to 4 hours.
And I don't disagree, but the the pessimistic or the non-hopeful part of me, also wonders where we're gonna be at in the fall, and with and even in September and November with the primary and presidential election, and I just that is gonna be more volume, and who knows, it's a huge hypothetical, but I would just think, and I don't want to say an exercise, but I think actually going through a full election, at this point with the precautions and taking adequate precautions, could be helpful for in the event that if this thing, God forbid, is around longer than we envision it right now. And I just throw that out there. I know and I understand and I respect everything that you mentioned, Donna, but I just I just think about those things too. If so then if in November we have to deal with something, we're not scrambling to do something for the first a time like in, and considering all these contingencies on a much more robust scale. But, I'll leave it, to everyone else to, chime in or weigh in. But, again, I understand why you're proposing what you are. I'm just thinking, and in a much more pessimistic way about, how we're going forward in 6 months as well.
Okay.
Does anybody else have a point?
Yeah, I mean, I went through all the rules that would pertain to this. I mean, I do tend to agree with Mike a little bit on the fact that because there is a contested election, I mean, that 4 hours that could end up causing us more heartache than is necessary, and could cause us to actually violate the social distancing. With that being the case, but Donna, I'll defer to you. I mean, if this is what the state is coming out and saying, and you think you can really push for the early voting and get that stuff done, and it'll be, I don't know, you just hate, an election is a time where you like to give everybody, their equal chance and their fair chance, and I think part of me thinks, cutting it down to just the 4 hours might be something that may not be fair to the people running, but it also may not be fair. It might jeopardize the social distancing aspect of what's going on. I mean, otherwise the plan I think looks good. I think you got everything highlighted. Everything I read through looks good otherwise. But I think that's just something maybe for some further discussion on this. Anybody else?
You certainly don't have to vote on the hours tonight.
Yeah.
If you set the date, at least we can move forward from there.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be wise to see what kind of response we get in the first couple of weeks about the, absentee or the voting, remote voting. So maybe.
So why don't we do that, Donna? Why don't, I'll take a motion from the board tonight. Well, I mean, whatever motion, if the board wants to pass it as is, then we can pass it as is. Otherwise, we can just set the date. And maybe we do a little bit of homework on it and see where we are in a couple of weeks, and we can set the times based on some conversations we've had and what Donna sees in the absentee ballots and early voting process. Any thoughts on that, guys?
That works.
Yes.
Rich?
So at this point, I think we set the date. I'll make a motion to set the date for June 20th. And then at that point, we can talk about the times. And I hear everybody, at the end of the day, the number of people that are going to vote that day will be what that number is. And the interactions are going to be between the voter and those at the actual polling station. They're going to be the closest. Whether it's 4 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours, the biggest thing is how do we make sure that there's social distancing waiting to go into the polling station. I think that's the only thing. So whether it's 6 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, you're going to have multiple people there.
Mm-hmm.
Once you take care of that, I don't think it's really going to make much of a difference. Obviously, the lines may extend out, but where both happen, they're in large parking lots. So, the line may have to go out, and we just have to enforce, at least in my opinion, the social distancing. One comes in at a time, they do what they do, and then the next one comes in. It's just going to take longer to do it. That's all.
Yeah. Would we be able to ensure that anybody, if the line is long, it is, like you said, there is at least there's one election that is contested. Anybody, at what point do you cut the line off and say you're not going to be able to vote by 4 o'clock, by being in the line?
No, you don't cut off anyone that's in line, ever.
Yeah, so
if someone's in line, when the polls close at 8 o'clock, if there are people that are in line at 8 o'clock, they're allowed to vote.
But now
They
we run
can't
into
come
that.
in, they can't come up after 8 o'clock and try to sneak in line. But that is a state standard. If you're
Maybe-
in line, if they were in line after 4, 5, whatever, 6 hours, if they were in line, they are allowed to vote.
I mean, and maybe this is devil's advocate, but then you're running into the possibility of your poll workers not being there for just 4 hours, but them being there for 5, 6, whatever amount of time it takes for them for a line that could wrap around a building potentially to get through.
May I?
That could be on any election, Mike, to be honest with
Sure.
you.
Sure, but I mean, in this case, because the hours are so limited, and we're talking about the social distancing and we're reducing those hours, it could just be, like I said, I think it's just part of the conversation.
Right, may I speak?
Yep.
This is a small town election. The amount of people who voted are about 1,800. Let's advertise, from this moment forward, you can pick up a ballot in the mail if you sign your name saying, I, Larry Ryan, want an absentee ballot mailed to my house, sign my name and get it off in the mail. I think that if we advertise it on our website and social media, most of the people will, and then maybe that'll draw it to the fact that we're having an election that there's only going to be 4 hours. I mean, there's one contested election. Yep. Okay. So what does that mean for those 2 people? You get your people out to absentee ballots and to come that day and vote, and that you're going to be there. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to come out to a slightly contested election anyway. So you're not going to have 100 people waiting in line at any one point at all during this election. And the federal election comes in the fall or whatever, maybe. But this one is going to be a ghost town, to be honest with you, I think. I mean, who's going to come out and vote for Michael Laughlin except for his family and friends who just want to, seriously, and you're not contested, you know what I mean? And the only one that's going to be contested is the Board of Health, and it's going to be incumbent upon those 2 people to make sure that their voters get out.
It would come out to vote for Mike Mullen, though.
I'd rather go 10 to 2 than 12 to 4, but I'm a morning guy, you know what I mean? So, but I intend, quite frankly, to send in my papers tomorrow and send me a ballot, and that way I'm going to be the first guy in line to do it, so that people can follow us as a way of doing stuff. Seriously, I mean, if we do it and we show people this is how it's done, and this is the safest way that you can vote and be counted, and that way we may even get more voters because they can sit at home and vote. I don't know. I'm with Donna on the 4-hour business. I don't think it's incumbent upon us to make it any longer or make it any more difficult for the people that are attending the polls, because I don't believe that there'll be an overwhelming turnout on this election, A, and B, if we do the proper advertisement and we all or not stick together, but get out there and say, listen, I'm Larry Ryan, I voted today because that's the safest thing for me to do. And I think that you'll find an awful lot of people will follow our example and do what we tell them to do, because, again, who wants to go out there? Hey, I know my candidate's up. I want to get down and vote. I want to make sure I vote in. Boy, I had a great way to stay at home and make that vote. And I don't have to go down there. I don't have to see the guys waving signs at my face, even though they're not going to be this year. But, I just think we go with it, see how it runs. I think if we advertise correctly and we all tell our people to get out there and vote, and this is the way you can do it, send a piece of paper, we'll overwhelm the poor clerks off the mail, and poor Donna will be tearing her hair out in a week.
Thanks.
But it'll be a good thing for election day.
Larry, you very well may be right, and I think part of it is to Mike's point of looking down the road, and maybe you're right. This election, it won't be that much interest, but Mike, I think, brings up a very valid point. We have two big elections coming up that will definitely have some interest. So maybe that's not this conversation that we're having right now, and maybe I jumped the gun on that a little bit, but
Yeah,
I think
each election is going to be an individual election, and election can be dictated to the conditions that are to bear at the time. So if we have a full election, you have a schedule. When you have a presidential, then you have to go for it. And then I'm sure that social distancing will be still be a thing. But that's again, now we're talking November, so we don't know what the actual conditions are going to be at that particular time. And if the crowd's being released to go back to work and do that sort of thing, are we still going to have to wear masks in November or September when primary comes? The chances are probably yes, but we don't really know the answers to all these things until it actually happens. So, forget the federal elections now. Let's just dwell on the local election that we're going to have and get that out of the way, and let's go from there. Town meeting is our next biggest thing. The federal election is really kind of low on the town's list of worries that we got to worry about right now. So, no offense, I just think that it's paramount that we get this election done, get it over with, and then we can plan on town meeting. That's even more important than the election, for one. So,
Is that a motion?
Go ahead.
I'll reiterate my motion to set the date for June 20th, and that we can finalize a time at the next meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Penny,
Yes.
and Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. Okay, moving on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Good job.
Next on the agenda, FY20, FY21 budget update. Mr. Lapp.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to share my screen again.
We didn't the annual town meeting update. Are we gonna?
Well,
do
yeah,
that?
I don't know that Donna has much. She's obviously can speak for herself, and maybe I'll give a little lead in for that. As I get into the budget more, I'm going to talk a bit about the dynamics that are at play with when we hold town meeting. So, but just to stay on the town meeting thought for a minute, as a team, we've been meeting regularly, the finance team, and we think we need to prepare for a town meeting that'll happen before June 30th, because that's in our best interest. That's when it normally should be done. The financials and the accounting is a lot easier when it's done before June 30th. We obviously don't know if we're going to be able to have it by June 30th if, the pandemic is still prohibiting larger gatherings. So our plan is kind of twofold, Larry. We're developing a budget, and we're coming up with plans, still looking at that June 22nd date. But we very well may 2 or 3 weeks before realize that we're going to have to postpone it until after June 30th and realize the 1/12 budget option. I've been talking with both, Donna as well as the moderator and Dr. Cron, and it sounds kind of silly, but we've been tossing out the idea in late June of looking at having town meeting at the baseball stadium. People can social distance a lot better there. There's a lot more room. It's undercover. So sounds kind of funny, but it actually might be an option, depending on the weather and ensuring the lighting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, why can't you have, maybe there's an outdoor voting booth for people who don't want to wear a mask?
Right. So I'm going to get into more details on the budget, but our sort of planning is, I think we need to plan for a June 22nd town meeting, but planning doesn't lock us into having it. The warrant only has to be posted 2 weeks before. So the beginning of June, a month from now, we can decide to pull the plug on that for a variety of reasons, whether because of the finances involved or because of the public health constraints or any other logistical issues that were happening. I don't know, Donna, if you want to add anything different to that as far as the town meeting date goes.
No, I agree with you. And another option that one of the towns is proposing is that they want to do it in the parking lot, so that they want people to be able to sit in their cars, or they bring their own chairs and they sit kind of like a big drive-in movie. But whichever one, in order to have people vote, they've recommended using distinctly colored papers. Every registered voter would get 2 different colored papers so that even if they were in the stadium, even if they were in a parking lot, it would be very clear how they're voting. So that's some of the things that I've seen from town clerks just recently.
Yep, that makes sense. So with that, I think we'll talk more about, the logic of having town meeting before June 30th and after as I get into the budget more. Is it all right, Mike, if I kind of get into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen again. I'm going to start with FY20, our current year budget. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so as I talked about in previous meetings, we're in a big hole here in FY20, and it's generated by loss of revenue. It's not a problem with our spending. It's not a problem that departments or individuals are spending more than has been appropriated. The problem's on the revenue side, and to have a balanced budget, you can't spend more than you're bringing in. So what I'm presenting to you tonight is a summary of the problem and then a summary of the steps that as a team, the financial team and I want to do to close the gap. So the first item right at the top you'll see and these are all estimates, and I should clarify too that these numbers are changing literally every day, but this is the snapshot at the point in time I gave it to you on Friday. So we're estimating for property taxes over $585,000 that will be short by June 30th. And I won't go through and read every other number, but you can see motor vehicle excise is a big one, meals tax and rooms tax are other big ones. The Medicaid reimbursement is an interesting one. That's more of a timing issue. We will ultimately get all the Medicaid reimbursement that we're allowed to get from the federal government, but based on guidance we received from our auditors, and they actually give it to us in writing, just all the mess that Washington is in, as well as every other business, they don't believe we're going to get all our reimbursement timely by June 30th, and that a good portion will likely be delayed. And I've heard similar things with the IRS. If you submitted a paper tax return, your refund is likely going to be much more delayed than normal. So that reflects more of a delay than lack of a receipt at all. And you can see ambulance receipts, building permits are down, etc. When you add it all up, it's over 1.3 million that we're short. Now I should highlight, because we're also meeting regularly with Dr. Cron and Jane Hackett and Colleen Forlizzi at the schools. And as you know, the schools have already done some furloughs on their end because they've had an additional, separate from this, I'm looking at the general fund on their side, on their special revenue funds, their revolving funds, I should say. They've had deficits associated with preschool, after school, building rentals, all these things that can't operate. So they're essentially closed. Those functions are closed. They've had to close that gap with the furloughs they're looking at, or that they've done. But that's separate from this. So you could add it on top of here, but then you'd sort of offset that shortfall with the actions they've already taken in their revolving fund. So I'm really just focusing on the general fund. So this is a huge number, obviously, but we got to have it closed by June 30th. So what I'm showing down below is our recommended deficit reduction plan to balance the budget. So the first category of, it's about four items, are different sources of revenue that we believe we will receive, but that it's not the type of revenue that you can actually budget for, because you can't really budget for everything. There's some things that have a great degree of variability, or they're just the types of funds that, you do get them in, they ultimately turn into free cash. But in this instance, where the metaphor I've been using is we're emptying our pockets and we're shaking them out, and we're just shaking the tree for every penny. We want to use these top four lines, various miscellaneous unbudgeted revenue, tax title, trash liens, trailer park revenue, etc. So that totals a bunch. The next category, the next three, are all related to uses of free cash. So if you remember back to the earlier budget presentations we had given, and how we were planning on using the over $2 million we had in available free cash, we had set aside $200,000 that we were not going to spend as a little kind of mini reserve, a little set aside. I guess we called it the accountant's holdback. And so now is a classic example of what an emergency, a financial emergency is. So now, we're proposing to use that $200,000 to help close the gap. In addition, we were planning on appropriating transferring 150,000 into the stabilization fund. It was 75,000 in new money plus an additional 75,000 that was sort of making up for what the intent of town meeting was the prior year, but wasn't successfully done. So what this would do would be to not transfer in 75,000 of that 150 into the stabilization fund. Instead, it would be used to help close the gap. And then lastly, we had about 150,000 remaining that we had earmarked as use of for use of free cash to cover a snow and ice deficit. But as you all know, we had a really mild winter, which worked out great. All our bills are in. So we have about 150,000 remaining that we had set aside from free cash for snow and ice that we can use to close this gap. And the next big category, probably the largest single category, is a combination of closing articles. And what that refers to is if there's a prior article that was voted at town meeting for a particular project, and that project's either completed and there's a little bit left, or maybe that project can't move ahead for whatever reason. Just for whatever reason, if that project if there's any funds left, it would close it out and turn it back to be used toward closing the budget gap. Turnbacks is the jargon that we use when we talk about any available funds at the end of the year. Instead of just use it or lose it, turning it back so that any surplus is able to be captured now to close the gap. And then the spending freeze, these are all kind of aspects of the same thing, which is we're just curtailing our spending as much as possible to try to save as much and not spend our entire appropriation so that we can use that surplus, that extra to close the gap. And given all those items, though, we still need to do a little bit more. And so, a very high profile item that we've talked about before and the schools have done in their revolving funds are furloughs. And this is something that's really weighed on me heavily, as well as everybody on the team that's involved with this. So it's not something we take lightly at all. But what we're looking at doing is furloughing a number of town employees, and they're from a variety of buildings, the library, the youth commission, the senior center, and town hall. And I was not prepared to get into any individual positions or people or anything like that, but just at a high level to explain that, the intent of a furlough is that it's not a layoff. So, hopefully none of these will be permanent. It's not a layoff. So the town will still continue to pay its share of health insurance, and the employee will still continue to pay their employee's share of health insurance. So their benefits won't be affected. They'll still accrue time from the town like they normally would. They'll be eligible for unemployment. The town obviously won't contest that, and if anything, will actually help them be able to apply for unemployment. And then most importantly, right now with the federal stimulus that's out related to the pandemic, there's an extra $600 a week that's available for many employees. So there's actually some instances, we've talked about this before, where some employees, depending on their pay, their income, can actually make more on unemployment plus the $600 a week than they were when they were working. So our intent here is this will not be a financial hardship for people, but especially where we have buildings like the library and the youth commission that are really shut down and they're effectively not able to really continue providing their services. It just makes sense that to close this massive gap, we have to look at every opportunity. And at the senior center, there's core functions that are still happening that we're obviously not touching. Things like food service in the kitchen. They're cranking, helping put food out to needy people in the community, as well as the outreach coordinator, et cetera. And in town hall, we're still operating fully. Well, I shouldn't say fully, we're still operating and providing all of our core services, but there are some employees that aren't as effectively able to work remotely or work in this situation. And so what we're doing is we have some employees that would be completely furloughed, 100%, and then other employees, mainly the ones at town hall, that would have reduced hours to reflect the fact that trying to scale things back as much as we can to not negatively affect our operations, still bring in tax receipts, pay bills, manage our funds, et cetera, but still be able to realize the savings that's appropriate. while people aren't as productive as they normally are. So then list, and we'll obviously come back to all these or any of these that you'd like to. I'm not trying to cut any lines short. Listed below that are other options that we don't want to have to do now, but we can certainly talk about. One is additional uses of free cash. There's obviously still more free cash that is available that was slated to fund a whole variety of very critical capital projects. Many things are like leases for equipment that are ongoing leases that we have to pay for, that type of thing. We also are likely going to need free cash to help close the FY21 budget gap, which is a bigger hole than this one. There's also the ability with new state legislation to amortize any deficits related to COVID-19 over 3 years. And the reason why we're not proposing that now is we don't think that's the best position to start in, because it just makes the hole we're in next year and the year after and the year after that even bigger. Just right out of the gate, we're starting in the red. Additional uses of stabilization fund. That's something we're likely going to have to do for FY21. So we're trying not to do it right now in FY20. We're trying to save that for next year. Similarly, additional OPEB transfers, transferring money out of the OPEB trust fund, which we didn't want to do any more than we already have. But we're likely going to have to do some of that again to close the gap in FY21. So I wanted just to go over this with you so you saw in a simple one-page form what the problem is and how we're proposing to solve it. I'm happy to go into more detail in any of these if you like, and Biz and others are here to help me. I don't know that I necessarily need a formal vote. I think we can take these actions, and these actions don't require town meeting to get us to balance. But if you guys want to take a vote or you have any questions or suggestions, I'm certainly open to anything you have to say. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Doug. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm sure there's going to be some questions as to the steps that were taken in their presentation. I'll start with Kara. Kara, you have anything?
Sorry
Kara?
about that. Doug, so why did the school department furlough so many people before the town hall started pursuing this?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So that's sort of what I mentioned earlier, how I'm looking at the general fund and the actions they took were related to their revolving fund. So they had these huge operations, preschool, after school, daycare, building rentals, all these things. So when their buildings were shut down with the governor's orders, it's like a business, they immediately lost that income. Those people were not able to do their jobs. And so, I applaud them for making the difficult decisions and doing what they needed to do. It's sort of different on our side, because the governor, when they were putting out orders to close school, they weren't saying, close the library, and they certainly weren't saying close town hall, close the tax collector's office, etc. So it was just a much more complicated situation that we had to work through. And as time went on and ultimately our buildings got closed and our library was really effectively shut down, that's when we really started crunching the numbers. But I think probably the main difference is that what they did was really focused on operations that were completely shuttered a while ago. And so they kind of were, they were able to, and I applaud them for taking strong action early on, whereas our operations are still continuing. And so it's just a different situation. I hope that helps.
Kara, anything else? Kara?
Oh.
You good?
I'm good.
Larry,
Thank you, Doug.
Larry, anything?
I think Doug's making the right choices here. It's, places that can't open, we have to save the money somewhere, and we don't get rid of employees. A whole bunch of layoffs at the end of all this mess. We're not going back the other way. So, Doug, Jen, Biz, thank you. You're doing a great job. All our elected, quite frank. And I thank them all.
You know, Mike, one thing if I could add, I should have mentioned this earlier, you know, as I'm talking to other towns, because you'll see what I'm talking about is, you know, a lot of towns are doing the same thing, but not all towns. And the pattern I've found is the towns that are not having to take, you know, having to do furloughs or having to take such drastic action are communities that historically have budgeted a lot more conservatively, so that when some huge downturn happens, they're, you know, they have more cushion built in and they're able to absorb it. And, you know, unfortunately, just the way that especially our local receipts have been budgeted in the past, you know, we just don't have that luxury. You know, we've budgeted close. I think Rockland's had to do that to be able to, you know, meet the important needs it's had. But that's sort of why. But if you do look at other towns, you look at Hanover, they furloughed their entire library earlier on. You're looking at other towns looking at all these same options. So it's, I guess my point in saying that is, it's, you know, what you're seeing here isn't anything crazy or unique to Rockland. The only difference might be to the extent other towns have been more conservatively budgeting for years and they have a lot more cushion built in their local receipts.
Mr. Mullen? You're on mute. I'll go to Rich. Well, Mike figures out. Mike, there you go.
Oh my God, that was painful as heck.
You have no idea.
I know. In all seriousness, you know, I have a few things. Number one, when you look at a spreadsheet like this and you see that there's $100,000 in proposed furloughs, it's easy to get, you know, to stay on the spreadsheet and, you know, and to see how the spreadsheet balances. And, you know, to that end, you know, Doug, I really want to commend you, like, for your work, for your leadership, like, you know, and that of the whole financial team, because, you know, and how you approach this whole situation was with the thoughtfulness, like in the heart that you have approached everything so far. And, you know that, you know, behind that $100,000, like in furloughs, like our employees, valued employees, like our people and families and everything else. And I first want to thank you for understanding, you know, that, intrinsically that these numbers are more than just a spreadsheet. And, you know, you've always, like you've always conveyed that in the past year that you've been here. And I have to give a huge shout out to Biz also. When, you know, back in the early spring, it seems like 6 months ago now, you know, when we did the first pass at the FY21 budget, like in Biz proposed, you know, for the first time in Rockland, the accountant's holdback. You know, that was really new to us. And, you know, that is one of the things that is really helping it to save us right now. So, like, I really want to, you know, thank you and Biz and, like, in all the efforts of our financial team to, you know, to keep us on a path, you know, where we're going to hopefully be able to close in the black. You know, one of the, you know, things when we talk about furloughs and, like, and when we talk about where we're going into next fiscal year, would you be able to explain just for the, you know, for the folks at home, what the balance of our stabilization account is, and, you know, and how it's very wise not to really look at that account right out of the gate here, because like we really do have a long way to go, likely in this whole effort.
Sure. And before I get to that part of your comment, Mike, I appreciate what you said, because I should have said this earlier. You know, we've already been communicating with all our employees that furloughs might be coming. And we've also met with the union additionally to go over the union implications. And we made clear in both instances, in writing and verbally, to let people know that this is not a reflection on anyone's performance at all. You know, this is solely due, and I'm just obviously talking about the furloughs, this is solely due to the logistics and the financial constraints and just the reality of the situation we're in. It's not based on anyone's performance. In a second, I'll ask Biz to give us the more precise number on the balance of the stabilization fund, but I can say in my over 15 years of doing local government management, I've never taken a penny out of stabilization before. You know, that's not something any manager ever wants to do. So it's, you know, it's considered an emergency rainy day fund, and it takes 2/3 of a vote at town meeting to put it in or to take it out. So that higher hurdle, that higher quorum is reflective of the fact that it's a big deal. But this, you know, a worldwide pandemic with the most catastrophic impact on the economy in our lifetime or the last 100 years, you know, this is the definition of what a financial emergency is and what is going to necessitate taking some out. So you'll see when we talk about FY21, we'll get into that a little bit more. We're going to have to use some of that, but we certainly can't empty the whole account because that wouldn't be responsible. I won't have a number for you today as far as how much we're going to propose to use. I'll have that for you in 2 weeks. But that's just another reason why we didn't, you know, we propose not putting more in at the annual because it doesn't make sense to put it in and then just take it out again later. But I believe we have over $1 million balance. I'll let Biz give the best accurate number.
1.8.
We have just over $1.7 million in the stabilization fund.
Great. Thanks, Biz.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Rich, any questions?
Yeah, I get a couple. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the unknown, right? So we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know when and if revenues are ever going to come back or when they're going to come back to those levels. We also don't know what help is out there from a state and federal perspective. So, you know, there's ongoing conversations at the federal level for quote unquote a bailout. But honestly, if the feds don't look to bail out the state and local governments, then all the other efforts that they're attempting to do to keep the economy going will derail what they want to try to ultimately do. So with that, my concern is taking that free cash and putting it to trying to balance this budget. Would we be better off looking to amortize this over the 3 years and what the state is allowing? My only concern is when this potential bailout comes, if we've taken our free cash and paid down our debt, does that negatively impact us? Now, I don't think anyone here can answer that question, but I'm just concerned on that side where if we look to amortize that debt over the 3 years, it's out there. Does that actually help us when they come to, you know?
Yeah, can I speak to that a little bit, Rich? I didn't mean to cut you off, but we've been talking about that, so I completely get the question, and so it's interesting, and we could probably talk for a couple of hours on this because there's so many angles to it. All the calls that I've been in on with all the town managers and all on the state calls, they've repeatedly been asking, you know, about the federal money, and the word we've gotten from day one is always, it will not make up for revenue loss. It's only for, you know, new costs incurred over time or anything unbudgeted, not revenue loss. But as you're pointing out, you know, and as the 1.3 million shows, it's the revenue loss that's what's really killing everybody. So there are some discussions now in Washington about it, but I wouldn't say when. I think it's a big if personally, because the latest news, even going up to tonight, is there is absolutely no consensus about Washington using federal money to make up for revenue losses in towns. But all that being said, we don't believe that taking these kinds of actions would put us in a negative position if they do come to some deal, because again, what we're talking about are revenue losses. So our revenue losses are documented. Biz has all the documentation for that. So, and we have to have a balanced budget ultimately, you know, and so that's why we feel that we should be prudent, and conservative and not start in a bigger hole next year and the year after that. But if the feds do come up with it, we can clearly document we had to put off all these projects. We had to furlough all these people. We had to do these things, and we could show on our local receipts, rooms tax plummeted, meals tax plummeted, tax receipts went down. So we think we can kind of have it, we can act prudently and still keep us in a position to get that federal aid if it comes. And I think it's a big if. I don't know, Biz, if you have anything different you'd want to add to that.
I am in agreement with the federal aid because they are just starting to talk about it, and this is a revenue deficit, and that's what we're trying to capture is a revenue deficit, and we don't want to end up with a revenue deficit because it has an adverse effect and we'll end up with absolutely no free cash. And the numbers that we have here, they are our best projections on what Rockland's facing.
Okay. Thank you. So I get another question. I think I already know what the answer to this is, but I feel like I need to at least ask this. Obviously, you looked at one of the projected revenue shortfalls is reimbursement from the federal government. We continue to make payments to both state and federal agencies through payroll taxes and those things. I see Biz already smiling. Do we have options to actually delay those payments? They're delaying the payments to us. They seem to be able to do that. Why can we not do the same thing in return?
Doug, if I may.
Go for it.
State and federal
you knew
payroll.
this was coming.
You cut me off guard a little bit on the payroll, but state and federal on the payroll, it's payroll. It effectively is not the town's money. It belongs to the employees. And we file it with the federal government in order to cover the employee deductions for their payroll.
We make matching contributions, correct?
We make matching contribution only with our 1.45 FICA is what we pay, 1.45%. But it's not like a standard company where you pay the Social Security on top of that because we're in a pension system. So that's a little bit different as well. As well, we're talking about the government and the pensions, etc. One of the things we would need to do, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is being looked at, that can communities postpone their payments to the pension, Plymouth County Pension or PEREC, until this is resolved? Can we postpone it and not incur any liability? Right now, we're budgeted clearly between the water department, sewer department, and the town. We're budgeted for exactly what would be due for one payment during the fiscal year 20. And if we go out and we do two payments, it's going to cost us an extra $80,000. So that's how we budget, is to capture that discount. So unless there's some regulation that's changing that, we will be required to pay when it's due. And we usually pay it, I think it's beginning of August is when we pay.
Can I just jump in on that one more, Rich? So that is something that in all the calls with managers with the DOR, they've talked about, which is if towns need to go to a 1/12 budget, our money, we don't spend our money at, exactly 1/12 increments. And so there is a bill pending that would give relief to allow towns to not have to front load it, but not lose the $80,000 in savings like Biz is talking about. But I don't think that's been signed into law yet. That is pending, but we're looking at it. And can I just say one last thing, Rich? I just want to be clear that I'm not trying to be dismissive at all about your question earlier. And that's why we're sort of like listing all these options, like on that other page, which could show the amortization because it's there. We're just not quite sure right now that it's the best move for us, but we're open to every option.
No, and that was more my question. I preface it saying I don't think anyone here can actually answer it. We can't because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I just felt I had to at least bring that up and make sure we're looking at any potential options and, having conversations with the state and the DOR and just seeing what the options are. I mean, we don't have any great options at this point, but, we want to try to make the best decisions possible. I know you guys are.
Thank you.
So Doug, I just for the people watching at home, so since so much of our FY21 budget, deficit rather, is based on a projected reduction in state aid. An example, Chapter 70 or such. And since the state likely won't be coming out with their budget until after June 30th, why don't we just delay town meeting and further start doing the 1/12 budget that you were talking about, and push town meeting back further in the summer when we know exactly what our state aid will be, and maybe go in briefly into what the 1/12 budget is, just for the people at home.
Sure. So I'm happy to talk about that. I wasn't sure if are you guys pretty good on the FY20 plan that we laid out before we get into 21, or because I feel like that might be kind of shifting the discussion a little bit. If you want to go there, I'm happy to do it. So that's fine. So I guess should I show the numbers first for FY21 so we can kind of actually see what we're talking about? I could share the screen again. Is that all right with you? So let's see, here we go. All right, I know these numbers are smaller, but what this is showing is FY21. This column here in the middle is what we were working off of before. And again, because we had everything all done. And this column here is our new COVID-19 column, again, with just what you were saying, Mike, with all our projected revenue shortages carrying forward. The two numbers that I've highlighted in yellow are the most important ones. This bottom one is the change in projected decrease in local receipts. The same thing I was just talking about that started at the end of FY20. Motor vehicle, excise, rooms tax, meals tax, building permits, all those kinds of things. That's down by a bunch. But the biggest part that is this huge unknown is what's going to happen with state aid. And so you'll see here what we're projecting right now. And again, we don't have any crystal ball, is like a 1.8 million decrease from what we were planning on having for FY21. Because you got to remember, we had a huge bump that we got from the governor's budget, that we were slated to get from the governor's budget because of the new Chapter 70 reform. So to answer your question, Mike, your question gets to the heart of our biggest dilemma right now. And so what that dilemma is do we plan for the worst, because we're in these terrible times. So we make, and I should have highlighted, we're projecting over $2.5 million revenue shortfall next year. So 2.5, and again, the biggest part of that is a potential decrease in state aid. So do we plan for that huge decrease in state aid, have a town meeting, late June if we can do it, and then make these painful cuts that we're going to have to do to live within that budget, and then later, whenever the state ends up passing their budget, if we end up getting a whole bunch more state aid, have a special town meeting and supplement our budgets. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, as you suggested, is we could just wait, because there's no indication when the state is going to be telling us what our state aid is going to look like. Every town manager has been hammering the DOR on all these calls, every week. So since we don't know when that's going to happen, and we have the provision for 1/12 budget, why don't we just look at doing the 1/12 and do town meeting later? So I think sort of the downside to that is, it's more complicated from a financial management perspective, because now we're cutting across fiscal years, and it's a complicated accounting issue. But also, the 1/12 budget, we can't bank on this whole big increase in state aid in the 1/12 budget. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Either way, we're looking at a low budget, and it's uncertain, and we're going like month to month, where at least if we have a town meeting and we plan on this austere budget, we know what we have to live with. And if we get more later, great, we can supplement that and improve things. But if you go 1/12, you still have to cut back to because that 1/12, we can't just put in some huge number that we make up. The DOR has to approve it. It's got to be something reasonable based on past history and what we're actually going to incur. And I don't see how we can presume we're going to get an extra 1.5 or 1.8 in state aid in that 1/12 budget. So in some ways, it's 6 to one, half dozen of the other, except that there's a little bit more uncertainty going with a 1/12. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope it helps, Mike.
Yeah, no, definitely does. Sorry, I jumped it a little bit. I was looking ahead to the next page that you had given us on the agenda. So, I know you said at the top of this discussion that you didn't need a vote from the board, or didn't require necessarily a vote from the board. I think symbolically, just to support you, I think I would entertain a motion from the board to approve the steps that you've put into place. And now any motion that's made is obviously done, with the understanding that this would include the furloughs that Doug had mentioned, and that the town would continue to work with every individual that is being furloughed in helping them set up their unemployment. So I would, yeah.
Oh, Doug.
Can I just say one thing, Mike? But before you guys take a vote, I just want to make sure we're clear again that, these numbers are going to be changing daily. And since we prepared this last Friday, I think that furlough number is actually going to be lower. And I think that turn back line is going to be a little higher. So I just want you to know, please don't vote the specific dollars. It's really more just the steps that we're taking.
More directional.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would make that motion in terms of the principles that you, Doug, and the financial team are presenting to balance the remainder of the FY20 budget, to support those principles.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Mr. Ryan?
Sure. Yes.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
And Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
And myself, Doug. You guys, you and your team have our full support. I know these aren't decisions that are made easily, and I know you've had a lot of heartache in viewing all of the decisions that need to be made. But to your point, it's really the only place to go at this point in time, and the information's changing day by day, and none of us know what tomorrow holds. So, we're paid to make decisions, and we support the decisions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. And it really, I say the same thing every selectman meeting, but it's really true. I mean, I did all the talking, or almost all the talking, but it's been a team effort. Our financial team meets weekly, and there's been a lot of different input. And so I thank all of them, all the financial department heads, as well as Jen for helping with this. And can I continue with FY21 a little bit more, if that's all right? So again, just to kind of finish this thought we're having about when we're going to have town meeting and how we're going to handle this. This is sort of the plan that we have, and I want to make sure it makes sense to you guys. So for the reasons I stated before, with Donna, we feel like we need to plan for a town meeting before June 30th, because who knows, a month from now, the governor might decide that we're able to have some larger gatherings, and we'll need to have town meetings before the end of June. So I think we need to plan for that. But I also think that it's equally possible that we might not be able to have town meeting and it may get put off. So this is just unprecedented times. No town manager I know has ever done a budget, had to yank it back, and then not even know if they're physically going to be able to have town meeting or not. So it's really extraordinary. So what I think and you know what I'm just realizing too, is I'm looking at all of us on the screen now. Stacy's been patiently participating in the meeting, and I neglected to mention her before as well, because all this stuff that we're talking about with furloughs, Stacy's been doing the most time out of anybody, a tremendous amount of time, and certainly with the implementation of it as well. She's going to be bearing the brunt of all that work, and she's a one-person office, so I can't believe I forgot to mention Stacy, so thank you, Stacy. But going back for the town meeting budget stuff, so what I think we need to do is the following. We have a tentative date for June 22nd. If you back that up 2 weeks, right? That's second week in June. So my plan is between now and our next meeting, 2 weeks from today, which will be the 19th, Biz and I will present you with our recommendations for a balanced budget, how we're going to cover that $2.5+ million gap. And generally what that's going to look like is we're going to use some of the tools we talked about earlier. We're going to use some stabilization fund. We're going to use some OPEB funds. We're going to look at, are there any other budgets we can, maybe decrease. Maybe if the schools are going to have to take tough measures and not hire more staff, maybe we can lower our health insurance compared to before. Who knows? We're going to look at everything we can to lower that $2.5 million revenue deficit. Then we're going to have the net amount that we're going to have to cut, and we'll look at the 70-30 split, and we'll have a fair allocation between the school department and the general government side. And then the schools will obviously have to speak to how they'll make their cuts, but we'll present to you how we'll do it. And so I'll present that to you in 2 weeks. That'll be the 19th. If you guys are good with it, the finance committee is planning on meeting the next day, the 20th, and they can vote on it as well. If you have questions or different directions you want us to go in, we still have the next meeting 2 weeks later where we can come back with whatever changes you like. The finance committee can meet again after that. And I'm just looking at the calendar to get my dates straight. So the next meeting would be June 2nd for us, Wednesday the 3rd for them, and that still gives us the following week to finalize the warrant and all that and publish it. Or if things are looking so nutty with the pandemic that we can't have town meeting or some different financial direction from the DOR and we want to do the 1/12 for a month, we can pull the plug on town meeting and not have it. But I feel like we have to be prepared to have that town meeting just in case. So I know it's a lot, but I feel like that's the only kind of path forward for us at this time. I don't know, Biz, do you think there's anything different you'd want to add to that plan?
No, I think we're good. I just want to be cognizant of the fact that the school department will have to have the school committee revote their budget as well. So I just want to make sure that that's in our minds.
That's a good point. And, I'm being very cavalier in how I'm talking about the school budget, but these are obviously huge things. So, I mean, the way I'm whipping through this calendar, and within the next 2 weeks, we're going to likely have a very large number that the school department's going to have to cut from what they were planning on spending in FY21. And so just as Biz said, there's going to be a whole ton of work that they're going to have to figure out on very short notice and work with their school committee. And so I don't mean to minimize that pain that they're going to go through, but I'm just, focused on what I have to do for, for the bigger picture. But that's a good point, Biz. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Doug on the stuff that you just went over for FY21? Larry?
Good job, Doug. And Biz and Jen. And Stacy.
Mike?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you all.
Rich?
So, I just want to say thank you to the entire team. I know this is difficult to do. Every day you walk in there, it's, what does today bring you? And these are not decisions that impact, not only hundreds of employees, but 17,000 residents in town. So I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
And Kara?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. Other old business not reasonably anticipated. Nothing, Doug?
Not for me, no.
All right, town administrators report and correspondence.
So just a couple of very quick things. Believe it or not, we are still progressing with the McKinley School feasibility study, and it's just obviously difficult to be working through this, just knowing the financial situation that taxpayers are in and residents in the community. So it's hard to really think about and plan for a large capital project, knowing what tough times this is. But we want to finish that. We want to finish that work. So I just wanted to update you on the timeline. We obviously pushed things back. So our plan is to have a draft report for you, all of you, at your June 2nd meeting. And then that will give us, we can look at it, you can ask questions, we can talk about it, give us any input you have for the consultants and the architects to finalize it for your following meeting on June 16th. And at that meeting, we'll have the architects do a full presentation, PowerPoint, and go over the whole thing. But just in my experience, I thought rather than just hand you a finished report and you might have questions or things that you wish we explored a little differently, and then it's too late, we thought share a draft with you, and then you can give us that input, and then we'll finalize it 2 weeks later. So
the 2nd for the draft and the 16th for the final report on the McKinley School feasibility study. I already mentioned the Finance Committee is going to meet on May 20th. And then the last thing is sort of related to COVID and related to the budget that I mentioned earlier. I just thought I'd highlight it again that we are executing that MOU with a firefighters union to buy out unused vacation time and remaining in FY20. And I want to thank them for their flexibility, because this is an example of one of the things that we were talking about earlier, like finding any way we can to save money and minimize furloughs this year. And so this is because, you know, when a firefighter takes vacation, we have to fill that shift. We got to pay somebody else on overtime to do it. And obviously right now, not only, you know, people don't want to take overtime, and it has a big ripple effect on the operations of the department. So we're actually able to buy it out unused time at straight time, not at overtime. So we're going to save, you know, conservatively, I'd say $10,000 to $15,000 before June 30th by doing this. So I want to thank them for their flexibility and just helping us close the gap. And that's all I had tonight. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Doug. Selectmen's comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but the past few weeks and the past few meetings we've had, I really said the same thing at the end, because I truly mean it. People I talk to here and there, in my work now, they ask me on a regular basis now, how's everything with Rockland going? How's everything with Rockland? Where are you guys at? And I honestly have to say there's a whole ton of things that keep me awake at night, and cause me to wake up at 3 o'clock and think about a whole host of things, as we all do. But one of the things that thankfully I really know that we don't have to worry about as much as we had in the past, is where Rockland's at, and that's really because of the team we have. And I know I've said the same thing at the past 3 or 4 meetings, but I truly believe it, and I truly am appreciative of it, and I just hope all of our employees, and most importantly our residents, really know and they see and they understand the same things that we do have a very remarkable team working for us. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Ms. Nyman?
I think my colleague summed it up perfectly, but I just want to thank everyone once again for their continued cooperation and hard work during this time.
Thank you, Kara. Mr. Penny?
So, this pandemic is continuing to polarize our country, and I think everybody has been locked in for such a long time, and people want to get out, including myself. And we are going to be faced with there's a group of people who are absolutely afraid. There's a group of people who just want to get out and get back to their normal way of life. The only thing I'll ask is, as we do community, be cognizant of your neighbor, right? So the things that you do, unfortunately, more than ever, can impact your neighbor, right? So, I'm going to be the first one. I don't want to wear a mask, but I have to, because I don't want to be the one responsible for getting someone sick and ultimately that person dying. And I think as we do this as a community, we're going to be asked to do a lot of things that we haven't in the past, that we're not happy with personally. But at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do for society. So I just want to say to everybody, just continue doing it, continue the social distancing as we get out more often, wear the masks. I know it's uncomfortable, but do this in the long run. It's the best thing to do, and be safe.
Thank you, Rich. Mr. Ryan?
Let's see. First of all, I want to thank our team. They do a great job. Second of all, we talked about nurses on the front line, and I'm going to mention a few names here because they're all related to me. My son Matthew was a director of a nursing facility. He works night and day. He hasn't missed a minute, and he's lost an awful lot of people in his business. His daughter, Morgan, works in a nursing home. She's been there night and day, hasn't missed a minute, and she's missed a lot of people too. Liz Worden and Pete Worden's related to, that's Mary's sister. Michelle, Patricia, Betsy, and Danielle, all nurses in the system, working day and night. My brother Dan has two daughters, Katie and Tracy, working night and day with the pandemic. My sister Nancy has a granddaughter, Dana Crowley. I think she's a new graduate. She's going right from school right into the fray. And I want to take the time to thank all of them for the hard work they've done. I come from a family full of medical people, more nurses and x-ray technicians and CAT scanners and everything else that you can imagine within our family. And the older ones were on the front line and some of the other pandemics. Specifically the AIDS, when AIDS first came out, we were all there standing in line, learning how to deal with that. So to them people, I say thank you very much for all that they do for the public. Larry Chaffee, as you know, or maybe not know, is in a nursing home in Rockland, and he tested positive for the COVID virus. Fortunately, he had no symptoms, and he has recovered, I guess, from, especially supposed to come off the list tonight, I guess. So there's an awful lot of people affected, and everybody has somebody in the business, and 85% of the people, or better, 80% of the people in the town, in the state of Massachusetts, support the Governor Baker's initiatives, and those 15% or 12%, you know, I understand their frustration, but you know something, we can't drive down the street at 100 miles an hour. Look what happens when there's nobody on the car. More people died on the streets these days of news reports because why? Because the people that are driving can't be responsible enough to keep it under control. So enough of soapbox. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to Chief Duffy and the Rockland Fire Department under Lieutenant Minnow Salmon for the job they did on down by the farm today on Summer Street for the fire. It was quite a scene down there for a time. The house was pretty well involved, and they did a great job putting it down and getting it out. We have a great personal fire department and police department, and all the way up and down the street. They were in place doing what they were supposed to be doing, and the fire was out in no time. So thank you to those people. And let's see what else they have here. That's it. Stay safe, everybody, and most people are following the rules and regulations as they see them because they know the only people that the worst danger to any one species on Earth comes from itself, from its own species. So that we have to. That's why we have to make up these rules for safe distancing and the mask, etc. People want to cry about how it's inconvenient or it's not my rights and all that other baloney. You know what? That's selfishness. And you know, you can call you all the freedoms you want. I can walk out my door anytime I want. I can get out of the store anytime I want. I can call anyone I want. All I got to do is conform a little bit. And if you're not willing to do that, you know what? Who needs you? And I mean that because you know I'm 69 years old. I'm in pretty good health. I probably could survive the test, and who knows? But you know, somebody else in my family might not. Somebody else in your family might not. So put your mask on, stop your crying, and let's be big boys and girls here and follow our mummies and daddies' advice. Thank you.
Larry, always well said. Thank you very much. So I haven't got much tonight in closing. I do want to thank both the police and fire department. Sunday was my daughter Grace's 10th birthday, and they were kind enough to do a drive-by parade with 20 to 25 other cars. It was really nice. I mean, that's kind of a forgotten thing throughout all of this. You know, the kids that usually have their birthdays and have their friends over, and they're not really able to have friends or family around for that. So, you know, a little small gesture by the police and fire department went a long way, and for that I appreciate it. And then to reiterate what everybody else said, you know, I every day I appreciate the quality of the staff that we have at Town Hall and in our administrative positions at Town Hall specifically. And it would be a lot more difficult if you guys weren't in place. The team that's been put together up there, both by the board and by the residents, are more than qualified, and they don't make decisions that they haven't fully researched. And I think that's the thing that we appreciate the most about the job that they're doing. They bring a lot of information, and they do a lot of fact checking before they make a decision. And no decisions are made lightly here tonight. It's not anything that any of us want to do at any time, but it's something for the best interest of the town at this time to in order to balance the budget for FY20. And as I've said many times, things are changing day by day. The rules are changing day by day. Middle of last week, we as a town came out and we were enforcing the face masks in public. Starting officially tomorrow, the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is enforcing that law as well. So, you know, we'll get through this. It's not too much to ask, as Larry said. You know, just put a mask on when you're in public and practice social distancing. We'll get through this pandemic, and then next up we'll have murder hornets, and we'll have to figure something out from there. So, with that, I'll entertain.
I just have one more thing, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mike.
If that's okay, like, I'm sorry, like, I missed the parade, but I drove by like 45 minutes later, and I kind of have my own parade, and I did my own beeping, so happy birthday, Gracie.
I thought that was you. Thanks, Mike. I'll pass it along. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes, and thank you, everyone, tonight.
And myself. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and stay safe. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, and be safe.